we talked about Bye Bye Birdie, which was his big break, and was my big break because I got cast as Conrad Birdie in the 6th grade play. We talked about working with Cheetah Rivera. We talked about working with Mary Tyler Moore on the Dick Van Dyke Show. We talked about his barbershop quartet, which he still sings with at age 93. We talked about everything except Mary Poppins because I could not wrap my mind around the fact that I am in a Mary Poppins movie with Dick Van Dyke. So I just sort of talked around it like an eclipse.
So I noticed that as soon as you put that down, you know it's Guardians of the Galaxy. That's my favorite movie of all time, and one of the reasons is because of the soundtrack. And I was wondering if you have any favorite soundtracks from growing up, any scores, soundtracks, composers, anything that really stuck with you.
Well, I'll tell you what I love about that movie, and I love that you are so young and that is your favorite movie. It's a great movie. Is the notion of the mixtape. I feel very lucky that I came of age at a time when cassette was the dominant form of listening to music. And here's why. I grew up in mixtape culture, and I believe everything I learned about writing scores, I learned when I was making mix cassettes for people I loved and for friends, because they have to listen to it in order. In the order I set. I am telling them how I feel about them by the choices of songs. And there's a rise and a fall. I want you to listen to the whole thing. There's a side A and a side B, just like we have an act break in musical theater. Everything I know about writing Broadway scores, I learned making mixes for girls I like. And that's how it ties back to Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's awesome. Hi again, Seth from Orlando Weekly. So you've got to help bring Mary Poppins back, and I know you're working on a live-action version of The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Is there another Disney classic out there that's a dream project for you that you would want to be involved in a remake or a sequel to?
Nope.
Nope.
Honestly, the moment Sebastian started singing to Ariel, that was the giant sort of supernova in my childhood imagination. I saw it on a play date with a friend, and then I dragged my parents back the next week, and then I dragged my sister to take me again, and then I called in sick from school the day it came out on VHS so that I wouldn't have to wait until the end of the school day. I was obsessed with how fresh and how inventive those numbers felt. They felt like they were written today, and yet they felt like instant Disney classics. So in answer to your question, I think my goal is to create new characters with Disney, the way we were able to with Moana. It was a great joy of my life to work with those Little Mermaid directors on Moana and write new music. And I'm going to sort of continue to find ways to create new characters with them in the animated world or not, whatever is required.
Hi, Sham with Monkeys Fighting Robots. So you have, in the film, you have this Leary speak that you had to learn, and it was basically like a new language of itself.
Yeah.
Could you talk about the process of learning that?
Sure. It was, it's in the tradition of Cockney rhyming slang, except I think that Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman wanted more latitude to create these lyrics and surprise audiences, even in London, of like, wait, that's not Cockney, that's a new thing. It's Leary speak. And so that was enormous fun for us. And, I'm in such awe of Scott Whitman's gifts as a lyricist. Getting back to your first question, I would go to his house and he'd have a stack like yay high of books of British arcana, British phrases from the 1930s, Cockney rhyming slang, etymology of British phrases. As a lyricist, I was just fucking jealous. I was like, where does he get these wonderful toys? And so it was a joy watching them sort of craft that number from scratch.
Can I? You can go ahead.
I think.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see her.
What do you think of musicals today in the era of digital in the cinema? Do you think that the audience is still interested as much as they were in the 50s and 60s?
I think it's not a coincidence that we are seeing the rise of the movie musical again in a very real way. I grew up in a fallow time for movie musicals. We had Fame, we had Newsies, we had Labyrinth. 80s were rough for movie musicals, guys. I loved all those movies that I listed, but there just weren't that many. I don't think it's an accident that the peak of the MGM musical and the Hollywood musical coincides with a really dark time in our world's history, 1930s and 1940s. And I think that we are increasingly going to the movies to escape and to have a collective experience of joy together. And the only way this continues, because listen, it's good for me. I write musicals, so I'm very happy that this is happening. But I think we need to continue to innovate and push the form. What I'm even more thrilled by is that Mary Poppins Returns is so different from A Star is Born, is so different from The Greatest Showman, is so different from Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, is so different from La La Land. And as long as we continue to expand the boundaries of the kinds of stories musicals can tell, then we, I think once we become a formula, we're dead, and then the musical dies for another 20 years. So as long as we keep kind of pushing the form, I think we can continue to see movies on the big screen in a big way. Because they're tough, they're expensive.
Yeah.
They're tough to make. So, we need to keep inventing.
Any chance we might hear you singing in Spanish? Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Janet Capron de Hispana Global.
Yeah.
So that's a question that's come up a lot in our...
Has it really? Well, I would love to. I mean, I speak Spanish. I sing in Spanish to my kids. And I would love to find an opportunity to do that. And it's a question, again, it's that question of, am I going to have to create that opportunity myself? Or will someone find a way for me to get to do it on screen? That would be a thrill.
I was watching how Michelle Obama became Michelle Obama, and she just talked about you a little bit.
Yeah.
And how proud she was that you sang the first, a long time ago, Hamilton. How do you feel about that? That you're an example for all of us Latinos and, sorry guys, and for more generations to come.
I feel really humbled. I ran into her on sort of the no. It was on a press tour. She was promoting the book, and I was also booked. I was the second guest, and she handed me a copy of the book, and I was expecting to Lynn, your friend Michelle, and it was this long introduction that she wrote me. And then I turned to the end of the book, and she writes a very moving passage about the full circleness of it too, right? I performed that song. I was like, I'm going to rap about Alexander Hamilton. She was like, all right, kid, good luck. Yeah, and then that we got invited back with our full company to perform an hour of material from the show, that I made good on my promise to actually write the thing and spend basically Obama's entire term writing the show. It was a very full circle moment for me, and that moment that she highlighted of seeing the famous portrait of George Washington overlooking our George Washington, an African-American man singing in the East Room of the White House. It was just as special for us. I will never forget seeing Chris Jackson sing one last time, his head so far back that the tears went sideways into behind his ears. I'll never forget that moment as long as I live, and the fact that she memorialized it in the book, it means the world to me.
And you can go ahead.
Okay. A quick question. Which musical would you recommend in Broadway right now besides Hamilton?
Oh, good question. My favorite, I haven't seen a lot from this season yet. My favorite musical last season was a musical called The Band's Visit, by the great David Yazbek and Itamar Moses. It's an adaptation of actually an independent film. And there's nothing like it. I've never. It has a mix of sounds that's got Middle Eastern influences in it. That's unlike anything I've ever heard on Broadway, and it's a perfect 90 minutes, and you're back to your babysitter by 10 o'clock. Don't we love that? I'm sorry I couldn't deliver that on Hamilton. It's a beautiful, magical night at the theater.
Going tomorrow to New York, so.
Dale, Band's Visit.
How did you feel when Sebastian started singing Triple Little Light Fantastic?
Oh my God. I mean, the fact that he walked out singing the songs was like, okay, we've done our job, because, that's how we feel on the first Mary Poppins film, right? Like, every kid can walk out of there trying to sing Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and he marched out of there, nowhere to go but up. And now he's been changing the lyrics because he's my son. And so it's been, Daddy, nowhere to go but diagonal. Nowhere to go but down. Nowhere to go but sideways. So I'm hearing the Sebastian variations all week. And that means that Mark and Scott did their jobs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Great round table. See you next time.